Hello and welcome to another Out of Spec Reviews video. In this video, we are taking the 2021 Lexus GX460 for a drive in 3 distinct environments. We're going to be driving it around the city. We're going to be driving it, shredding up the canyons because sometimes you got to get to the trails pretty quickly. And then of course, we're going to take it out on the highway, test the adaptive cruise and some driver assistance technology this has. So join us for our 3 environment test on the GX460. Now the GX460, the 460 in the name refers to the V8 engine size, 4.6 liter. Used to be a 4.7 liter. Interestingly, this exact engine requires premium fuel, makes 301 horsepower. However, for Russia, Kazakhstan, a whole bunch of like Eastern European, China, other markets, this engine actually makes 288 horsepower, I think, a little bit less. And I think it doesn't require premium fuel. So I think they wanted to hit that 301 horsepower target for our market and some other large markets for this vehicle, requiring premium fuel. And in markets maybe where the fuel isn't as easy to get in such high quality, they have a detuned version of this. Now this engine is not the same engine that we drove in the Land Cruiser Heritage Edition or the Toyota Sequoia, both of which we've reviewed recently on this channel. This is just the smaller V8. So how does it move this big heavy car around? Because it's not actually that much lighter than the Land Cruiser. It is a little bit smaller footprint. We're going to be testing that out in the canyons, of course, but first off, what we need to think about is this is the Lexus version of the Land Cruiser Prado that's sold in other markets. So there's a Toyota badged and appointed version of this vehicle. It just doesn't come to the US. In the US, we only get the Lexus version on this chassis, and it's been around for years. This chassis, I forget the exact chassis code, came out in 2009. It was restyled in 2020, and this is the 2021. So it's the second year of the restyle. Honestly, nothing majorly new here. There's a little bit of camera trickery so you can have like some off-road cameras and stuff, but it's all pretty much the same as like an old GX, which you kind of have to appreciate, which is Toyota and Lexus found a vehicle that's extremely rugged, extremely reliable. They've made some tiny incremental changes, but overall it's pretty neat. This one, for example, has height adjustable suspension. It has 3 different settings for the damper. All of these are on dip switches to the right of the shifter, which I really love. I have new, of course, for the updated versions, of course, are crawl control and the terrain response. That's the Land Rover one, but basically you can tell it what kind of terrain you're sitting on. It only works in low range like the Land Cruiser, and of course you have high and low range. So nice to have. Heated steering wheel here, cold day. It only heats the leather on the outside of the steering wheel, so the wood's actually really cold. So you'll see me driving like I should at 9 and 3 here on the wheel. Let's throw this thing in reverse and go. Real chunky shifter. This car has an extremely old school feel to it, which not many cars are left on the road like this. The ones that I can think of are Nissan Armada, much bigger than this. The Suburban and Tahoe have a much more modern feeling chassis. The Land Cruiser, of course, except that's going out of production. This is on its way out as well. And that's kind of it. I can't really think of many other sort of old school vehicles like from the mid 2000s that are still being sold today with very minor upgrades and updates. But you kind of have to appreciate, just first off, the people who buy these things new. This is not an inexpensive car. This thing's over $70,000. I think it's 72. It's a maxed out GX, of course. I think it's called the Premium. It's got everything. And yeah, but it's got like a sport appearance package for like making it look better. I don't know. I would skip all that stuff and go full off-roady mode if I was getting one of these things, because the capability is quite impressive and they are very rugged. First off, it drives super nice around town. The steering, for being a hydraulically assisted steering, I don't believe this is an electric rack. Very light, very direct, easy to turn, fairly good turning radius, which I can't say I remember on GXs of old. Now, I've driven a few Lexus GXs just over the years, but most of them have been modified. You know, second or third owner vehicles that were modified to go off-road. So big, you know, 35-inch tires, for example, racks all around. So this is I think actually the first stock GX I've ever driven, and man, is it comfortable. It's nice with the ride height set in the normal position and the dampers backed all the way off to comfort. That's how I have chosen to drive this car in the city for the last few days that I've been driving this thing, and it is extremely comfortable. Soaks up the bumps. It kind of more or less flattens the bumps, which is pretty nice. So suspension and steering are really pleasant actually, and what I would prefer to drive around town. You sit up nice and high above everyone. I totally see why these cars are so hugely popular in certain environments that are not off-roading. You see these things in city centers. I was in Dallas, I saw like 10 or 15 of these things. Nice roar, really good engine noise. Not much engine performance. Man, is this thing borderline underpowered, I would say. It sounds really powerful and muscular, but up here, you have to keep in mind, we're in Colorado, right? We're at 5,000 feet of elevation, so we're a mile above sea level. Things make a lot less power here. And then things that don't have forced induction make even less power. So we'll see how much throttle we have to use going up the hill, but I imagine quite a bit. I did make sure that the car was filled completely full of premium fuel. We had just finished up our MPG testing of this car, so stay tuned because we will have our 70-mile-per-hour highway loop test coming. And yeah, don't expect a big number out of that, but it did better than I would have thought, which is neat. So throttle's real lazy on tipping. You really kind of got to get into the throttle. It also does not like to rev out. So once you're cruising, it just loves to sit at idle, of course, for efficiency. But even if you roll into it, look, I'm like 70% throttle, nearly floored, and it was just like 2,100 RPM. You really got to smack this thing down quickly like this for it to drop a couple cogs and to go. Now the noise is quite intoxicating. Doesn't sound as good as the bigger V8 that you can get in Tundra, Sequoia, LX570, Land Cruiser, for example, but it still sounds pretty good. V8 does not like to rev very high. Indicated red line is 5,500 roughly, and I've seen it go up just about 5,700, 5,800 before it does a rev limiter cutoff or a manual upshift. The thing is, driving around in the city, there's no different modes to put this car in. There's no like eco or sport or comfort. You kind of just set your suspension to the comfort setting and then you cruise like this in your GX. Yeah, tons of room, great practicality. Love the swing open tailgate. Really a lot to like here in this vehicle, and driving is certainly extremely pleasant around town. It kind of gives you, and this is kind of how we'll leave it for driving around the city, it's a sense of like rigidity and solidity that you cannot buy really in modern cars today. There is something premium about driving a car that is just proven. You can tell this will just last forever, very under stress, not a high-strung drive line at all. Really great build quality. And that's kind of it. You just have to ignore the infotainment system because it's absolutely garbage. It's literally from 2007. Good sound system. Mark Levinson in this particular one's an optional, I think, $1,500 upgrade. So you pair your Bluetooth audio and then you just jam out and use your iPhone for maps, because this is just, not great infotainment. The climate control stuff's all pretty basic. Again, it's all straight from 2007 here today, just like other Toyota SUV products. And I gotta commend them for doing that, because these are certainly, while I don't want to make any predictions, I haven't done any long-term testing, of course, but I get the impression that this vehicle will outlast any new, techie kind of vehicle. This thing, you can just tell it has a proven track record and they haven't strayed away from it. Let's jump into the canyons and see how this is when we try and drive a GX460 quite quickly. We are now approaching the good road. So what we're gonna do to get this thing set up is, I have the dampers in comfort right now. I'm gonna bump them to the middle setting because I wanna feel if we can feel the difference from comfort to sport. I can tell you, I do around town notice that the bump hits are much further when you put this thing up into sport suspension. So automatic drivetrain, we'll see how long I can handle it in drive. Let's just see the shifting properties, the lazy shifting at least. See if the brakes can hold up to this. So Leaning Tower of Pisa here. It's very weird because you're sitting so sort of on top of the front wheels, you don't really get this impression that you're really turning an entire chassis. It kind of feels like you're the one that's moving, and that's just because you're sitting so far forwards in this chassis. So coming through at a reasonable clip. All right, let's just put the dampers in sport I think for safety. Oh, definitely notice a difference there. Definitely got in a little better. Full power. Interesting. Neat. Really, actually quite agile. Steering is unbelievably light off center. Power is really not terrible when you get up to about 5,000 RPM, 5,200. That's when this thing starts to sing. There we go. Yeah, a lot of shifting here. As soon as I let off the throttle and touch the brake, it just instantly upshift and constantly has to downshift. That guy was like, slow down. I don't know what his deal was. And so, interesting transmission tuning. Every time I get off the throttle, it instantly, you know, clicks up a few cogs. And then when I put my foot down, obviously it drops. What it should do is just stay in that gear. It should know I'm trying to drive it kind of aggressively. A lot of modern vehicles will have transmissions that are synced with the nav system, or they'll downshift preemptively here for a corner. This, I believe it's a 6-speed, does not do that. So there's no way to actually have manual shifting here in this vehicle. What it is, it's a gear limiting system. So you can say, I want it to go no higher than, for example, second gear that we're in right now. And now it'll just stay in second and sing. Yeah, it sounds pretty good. Definitely great sounding engine. Roads are a little wet. We're just going to take it easy now that we're going to be bombing a Lexus GX through here. So you just kind of have to deploy full acceleration anytime you want to get on the power, which is pretty interesting for sure. Here we go, big power. See, that's to the floor. Definitely an interesting power delivery. I wish they would put the big V8 in this thing. A lot of salt all over the road here. There, that just went to first. It's not slippery at all. So yeah, I would say definitely have to use, you know, get very comfortable with hard accelerations in this vehicle. Really get on the power to get it to move. The downshifts are not rev match, so it drags the downshifts like an old style transmission, and it is a 6-speed transmission. There, I've just limited us to third gear here. Foot down again, it drops to second. As soon as I lift off, third gear. Certainly not meant to have fun up in the canyons, but I will say that the suspension, steering, and braking are all calibrated way better than expected, actually, for a type of vehicle like this. It's certainly something you can hustle down a road. The main limitation here is the power. It's the drivetrain, the transmission tuning is much more geared towards comfort. You can see coming out of that corner, like here, I'm pretty far down on the throttle. I have to hit the bottom for it to kick down another gear. And so that's its main and really only limitation, to really go pretty quickly on these back roads. We're just taking it easy because as we gain elevation, we will gain slipperiness. So let's call that the canyon test. We know everything we need to know about it. Back into drive. Suspension for the GX kind of getting a bad rap for the moose test that happened to it. This is the generation of vehicle, well, it was a few years ago, where when you did a off-throttle emergency move, that they would actually get up on two wheels and kind of almost flip over. Here, I don't get any sense of that driving this car kind of sort of aggressively. Now, I'm not chucking it into corners, going full send descend. Yeah, here's where the ice is starting, so we're just going to take it easy. And but certainly calibrated enough to go just fine down a back road. Just use wide open throttle and use the gear limiter to hold the revs up, because you really do lose a lot of speed waiting for this thing to kick down a few cogs to pull you out of a corner. Yeah, 300 horsepower up here at elevation, probably 250. Not enough for this thing. Now it's time to get out on the highway and test one, ride comfort, noise, and driver assistance. So let's merge up to speed. We're just in regular drive, dampers back to comfort, full speed. Yeah, upshift at 5,500 there. Upshift at 5,500 there, but it kind of slipped into third. Didn't feel that good, actually. wide open. And 4th gear. Let's slow down to a reasonable pace. And yeah, 65 speed limit. Let's go 68. So what I've done here is I have the old style toggle of adaptive cruise control by my right knee. Now I believe this system will bring you to about 26 or 27 miles an hour and then shut off. It's not stop and go adaptive cruise control, which is very typical for like a 2010 Toyota system that's just been adapted over the years for this use. So I have the distance on the closest and we're pulling up behind this Sienna. So let's bump the speed up to 75 and let's take a look at the following distance. So here we are on the brakes right there. And I gotta say, that's pretty close where it's trying to keep us. That's fairly good. Now I'm a fan of a close following distance because in tight traffic you don't want cars coming in. But this is on a road like this, arguably too close of a distance. So let's try the farthest. Now we're on distance 3. There are 3 settings to choose from. You use a button on the steering wheel to toggle. So now we're backing off to the farthest distance. As soon as I feel the car pick up acceleration, I'll know we've hit it. And it's still putting distance in between us. While it's putting distance in, ride quality is superb here in the comfort damper, very comfortable. Ride noise is quite loud from a road noise perspective. Now this piece of pavement that we're on is a really loud piece of pavement, but I'm getting a lot of high pitch frequencies coming through the cabin from the tires. Now in terms of the boobiness when you hit a bump, which is very common in an SUV, really not there at all. So this is the farthest distance. Let's bring it back to the closest and see how hard it accelerates. Not very hard, but it is getting us, oh, it just downshifted a gear. The transmission and the throttle position for the adaptive cruise don't work in sync like some systems. So the transmission occasionally will just go whoop, because it just gave a hard input from the adaptive cruise control system, which it needs to realize won't last very long, of course. So okay, not bad. So let's test. This car also has lane departure warning, so I've enabled that. I have an indication here that it can see both lines. So let's try the right line. I'm going to not touch the wheel. Vibrating the right wheel and making a noise. Although, was that the pavement or the car? I think that's just the pavement is marked that way. So yeah, just vibrates the steering wheel. Now you can have an auditory warning associated with this. I believe I have it off in the settings right now. And no active steering, doesn't push you back in the lanes, nothing like this. It won't detect if you're not touching the wheel. I believe it'll just buzz the steering wheel. You get a vibration motor in the rack, even if we try this lane here. Yeah, it just vibrates the wheel and I have to push the car back into the lane. Now this particular car's steering wheel is not mounted on straight. You can see we're kind of always making a left turn going straight, and that's just, you know, these press cars just get driven hard. Who knows what happened to this vehicle over its 4,000 miles of abuse. Probably a lot of off-roading, curbs, who knows. But at least here the wheel is not straight, so when I put the wheel straight, we end up turning right, which is pretty funny. You can see we're going off that way. So just a little bit off kilter. Other than that, you can eat up the miles in this thing. Total mile muncher, comfortable, relatively quiet, great sound system, and you know, it's old school. It's old school luxury, and you know what? It works. It still is relevant today. Sort of that land yacht, just super smooth, low tech. You're driving. And I gotta say, there's still tons of people that appreciate this kind of thing, and certainly I'm one of them. Now, if I was buying a car for myself to go on a long trip, I'd really prioritize active lane centering. I think it's such a great feature that makes driving so much less fatigued and over long distances, and it's just not available here as an option. And a lot of that's just due to this car using its you know, hydraulic steering rack. I don't believe this is an electric rack, but you know, that's an old school. So I know plenty of people that would never even use a driver assistance functionality if they had it. They'd want all that off. They just like to road trip. Our videographer Timon is like this. He really quite likes this car on the highway for that particular reason, and they're still selling plenty of them. I think 2019 they sold over 22,000 units. So there's a market for this car. I really actually appreciate this vehicle. I think it's a really rugged, sturdy, strong SUV. I think the styling is subjective, of course. You know, you tell me what you think about how this car looks. Personally, the GXs have never done it for me. I've always been an LX 570 kind of guy, or a Land Cruiser, of course, all in that same SUV family. I've always liked the big ones, but I think this is much more maneuverable around town, far superior in terms of ride quality to the Land Cruiser. I have not sampled the new LX, although I imagine it's on par with this. That gets air suspension, the Land Cruiser doesn't. The Land Cruiser Prado we do not get in this country, which is based on this chassis, of course, like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, so I have not driven one of those, although I'd like to one day. I know you can get cool diesels and stuff in other markets in that chassis. So what do we have here? Final thoughts. We have a really great steering wheel attached to a very old chassis and old interior styling, but the materials are nice leathers. This plastic feels very high quality, sort of this brushed satin type look, and you know, cool functionality. You have automatic headlight washers. I can hit these and it sprays the headlights. You know, just neat stuff that you get. Very thoughtful features for taking this out into the backcountry, which a lot of second and third owner use types of this vehicle happen to go into, and it's certainly going to be perfect for that. And it's, you know, they've proven that for years now on the GX. So thanks so much for watching another Out of Spec Reviews video. I quite like the GX. It was great to spend a week with it. Not enough appreciation for this thing, I think. See you later.